So, good afternoon and welcome back to the series on Erickson psychosocial stages of development. Today, we embark on to do and study the fifth period of development. We have already finished getting the glimpse of the first four stages. We are now into the fifth stage. The fifth stage is the time of transition from childhood to the adolescence or the young adult stage or the adolescent stage. The fifth stage is also called a stage where either there is identity or there is complete diffusion of the identity, diffusion of the self. Now, why this kind of a name? So, if we look back at the previous stage, that is stage 4, which was industry versus inferiority. In that stage of life, one had learned skills, techniques, got in touch and explored the technology, science, and with the skill, there was some degree of self-worth that was associated. And the loss or inability to acquire the skills would result in a sense of inferiority. So already the skill is now acquired. You know the techniques to do useful things, because in that stage of industry, you also had a sense of purpose. So there is a goal that one has to achieve, and also you knew the technique. And also the other component was the other person similar to you, your peers, your colleagues, and a degree of comparison and a degree of competition with the peers. So the other has already entered into your consciousness, into your field of understanding. Now we go further. This is the time, usually it is an adolescent's age. And this is the time where there is another avalanche of hormonal activity that is buzzing in your body. This is the time where there is an accelerated shift in the body, in the very physical being. Because now is a time where there is genital maturity, there is sexuality that has come up. From that quiet stage of dormancy, this is the stage where you have the genital sexuality that has come up. So you realize that suddenly the body changes. The previous body is no more remaining constant. So here, this is the first break of a sense of continuity that was happening. Remember, human beings have a sense of continuity, especially through the body. When you have a sense of continuity, your body is remaining constant. It gives you a sense of constancy, a sense of continuity. But here, the first continuity breaks in your perception because the body now changes. As the body changes, the, the sense, the psychological sense, the consciousness now has to seek continuity in a different manner, because being continuous means being alive. Life is being continued. So now the ego, the sense of self, the consciousness has to change its reference, frame of reference, to now integrate within itself this new body, and also comes along with the new body the new feeling state, the new desires, which were hitherto till this time dormant. So it's a very confusing period. And through this confusion, through this chaos, one has to gain the clarity. Therefore, this is the most tumultuous stage of development, both for the individual and for the caregivers. Now, what makes this thing tumultuous is, from your past experience of the earlier stages and the earlier part lessons that you learned in your life, that we understood in the 4 stages of Erickson, we have gained control over the muscle, we have gained control over the musculoskeletal system, we have also started developing some skill set, and we have also started understanding a sense of purpose. All these experiences now have to come together and form a complete whole, along with the new body, the new sensations that come up in the body, the new desires that come up in the body. These therefore have to get integrated, these therefore have to cohere. So often, what happens in this process of consolidating the identity, the ego is getting consolidated, the sense of me is getting consolidated, is getting grounded. There will be times where something that is not me, something that you are not familiar with, suddenly kind of jumps out of you. So you will also find impulsiveness that's happening in these teenagers. But on these adolescent children, young adults is the right word, because childhood officially ends by that time. And now you're young adult. So in this state of confusion, you have to find yourself. Now, how does one find or recognize this new form self? Is through the idea of having somebody as your role model, as your idol, and it is with that it becomes your frame of reference, that becomes your point of reference. Therefore, here, the society's perception of who you are very often becomes more important to the individual than the individual's own perception of who he or she is. This needs to be understood quite clearly because this individual is still not clear about who he is. Discovering his own self. What the others give you as who you are is accepted as who I am because of this unsurety. And this is the stage when the individual identifies with the other who is outside. This is the time where the biggest understanding of the ego about who you are comes through projection. And therefore, you will find that not only it's the opinion of who you are, but these adolescent people are also more reactive to a certain set of people, to a certain set of situations. They get very involved. They are unable to keep a distance because of the idea of the self projecting on the outside. What therefore appears outside is actually within them, and therefore they get involved very easily, either with people, with situations. So, what we call, they are very emotional and it's very volatile also. It's very labile, it's very shifting also, because it is yet to consolidate, it is yet to solidify, it is still a fluid situation. Therefore, identity versus role diffusion. Now, with this situation of the self being reasonably soft, reasonably unclear, or yet clear, but some haziness is there, we will find that these individuals can go into a state of complete identity confusion. And this includes even the gender identity. Because it is this time where the genital sexuality also comes into picture. And therefore, sexual identity. So you will also find a lot of experimentation going on in this stage. It is basically the stage where you are still discovering yourself and trying to consolidate who you are. This is also because this is a very soft kind of self. This is also the time where one can encounter, as physicians, lot of psychotic illnesses. Psychotic in terms of psychiatry. But these psychotic illnesses are not probably as bad as those psychotic illnesses that would appear much earlier in the stage of development. Essentially, the whole idea is the sense of self is not crystallized. Therefore, there is a need also for role model. There is a need for a groove along which you need to be guided. And once this begins and happens successfully, a clear sense of self emerges. And when you have a clear sense of self, you also have a clear position in this complex human society. The position, therefore, gives you a function, gives you a role that you need to carry out in this complex real world. So, the successful crystallization of the sense of self will give you this clear, well defined role in the society. Very also, this would include gender identity, a clear gender identity. As opposed to this, when this is failing or this is not achieved, one will go into a state of diffusion. You understand what is diffusion? Haziness, where the sense of self is very hazy. It is very unclear. And these individuals will be compelled by the projections in the outer world. So, from the homeopathic standpoint of view, if we look at the symptoms of this stage, we will also find changeable moods. We will find confusion of identity. Person is not sure of who he is. Also, you will find this impulsive involvement, emotional involvement. For example, we have this classic symptom, falling in love with the wrong person. Also, you will find all the rubrics where the emotions will overpower the intellect also. So, wide range of emotions that will overpower the intellectual function. Then, confusion of one's sexual identity. This is also can be a part of this period, this stage, if it is unresolved. And all the rubrics that have got to do with expectation of the other, the need for guidance, and the sensitivity to the opinion of others. This is the hallmark of this stage. When you put all the things together, all the symptoms together, so all the remedies that cluster around these areas, especially you will find the periodic table, the latter part of the third row of the periodic table. Remedies like silica, remedies like sulfur. So this is an important tumultuous transition stage from childhood. You're now a young adult. And what the ego has to do is to identify and delineate one's own self and crystallize who I am. And therefore also to crystallize and clearly understand who the outside other is. And in this process, from a more softer, diffuse sense of who I am to a more solid sense of who I am. It is also called the identity crisis. It's a crisis, basically, to figure out who I am. So all the adolescents go through this identity crisis. The successful stage is to know who I am and to get a clear role definition and functioning in society, vis-a-vis complete loss of sense of who I am. So this is what we have for stage 5, identity crisis versus role diffusion. Identity versus role diffusion. I have in the chat box for those who are on Zoom shared a link. I will also share this on YouTube in the chat box for you to refer. It's a beautiful article. It's actually an article, a book actually on PubMed, which gives us a very basic overview of these Erickson's stages. It would be worth referring this book. So I will try to put this here. Let me see how I can put it. Okay. So I've shared it with all of you. Even when you see it at a later stage, you will be able to access this book. It's a very well written, very clear and crisp understanding overview of Erickson's stages of psychosocial development. So goodbye and see you all next Wednesday. We will do with the 6th stage and then the final, the 7th stage. So thank you very much.